California is a state in the western United States. There's some fucking forests to the north, deserts to the east, Mexicans to the south, and it touches the water. You know what else touches the water?
Your face!
The Californian! I mean the USS Californian. I mean the SS Californian, which was actually a British steamship owned by the Leyland Line, part of J.P. Morgan's International Mercantile Marine Company, which was also the parent company of the White Star Line that operated the Titanic. The Californian was a freighter designed to transport cotton from America to England. She also had cheapo cabins for roughly 4 dozen passengers, 10,000 pounds for a one-way ticket, to make a little extra money. Nonetheless, the ship was still primarily a freighter, as evidenced by her massive bunkers. She had about 50 crew, accommodated below the foredeck in uncomfortable, poorly ventilated, and dimly lit cabins. In all, the crew included the captain, 4 officers, a radio operator, and 49 other people. Californian left Liverpool on April 5, 1912, on her way to Boston under the command of Captain Stanley Lord. She was not carrying any passengers on this voyage. On the navigation bridge, Lord was accompanied by 3 other wankers and an apprentice, George Stewart, second in command or chief officer, Herbert Stone, second officer, Charles Groves, third officer, and apprentice James Gibson. The first week of the crossing was uneventful. On Sunday, April 14th at 1830, Californian's only wireless radio operator, Cyril Firmstone Evans, signaled to the Antillean that 3 large icebergs were 5 miles to the south. Californian encountered a large ice field at 22:20, and Captain Lord decided to stop the ship and wait until morning before proceeding further. Before leaving the bridge, he thought he saw a ship's light to the east, but could not be sure if it wasn't just a rising star. Lord continued to the engineers' cabins and met with the chief, whom he told about his plans for stopping. Lord asked Evans if he knew of any other ships in the area, and Evans responded, "Only the Titanic." Lord ordered Evans to warn all other ships in the area, which he did. Titanic's on-duty wireless operator Jack Phillips was busy clearing a backlog of passengers' messages with the wireless station at Cape Race, Newfoundland, 800 miles away. Evans' message that the SS California was stopped and surrounded by ice due to the relative proximity of the 2 ships, and the fact that both Evans and Phillips were using spark gap wireless sets, primitive radios whose signals bled across the spectrum and were impossible to tune out, meant that Evans' signal was strong and drowned out a separate message Phillips had been in the process of receiving from Cape Race. Phillips quickly said back, shut up, I am busy, I am working Cape Race." In his defense, Evans had not prefixed the message with the letters MSG for Master Servicegram, as was customary for all messages intended for the bridge. Evans, feeling he had done what was asked of him, despite Phillips' rude apparent rejection of the message, then switched off his wireless equipment and went to bed. 1 hour and 10 minutes later, Titanic hit an iceberg. 1 hour and 25 minutes after that, she transmitted her first distress call. Third Officer Charles Groves of the Californian testified to the British inquiry that at 23:10 he had seen the lights of another ship come into view 10 or 12 miles away. At about 23:30, Groves went below to inform Lord. Lord suggested the ship may be contacted by Morse lamp, which was tried, but no reply was seen. To Groves, she was clearly a large liner, as she had multiple decks brightly lit. The ship finally seemed to stop and extinguish her deck lights at about 23:40, the same time Titanic stopped her engines. Shortly after midnight, Second Officer Herbert Stone took watch from Groves. He testified that he too observed the ship, and judging it to be about 5 miles away, he tried signaling her with a Morse lamp, also without success. Apprentice Officer James Gibson, who had been doing the Morse signaling, testified that 0:55 Stone had told him that he had observed 5 rockets in the sky above the nearby ship. Stone testified that he had informed Captain Lord. Lord asked if the rockets had been a company signal, but Stone did not know. Lord and Stone both testified that Stone reported they were not distress signals. Lord ordered Stone to tell him if anything about the ship changed, to keep signaling it with the Morse lamp, but did not order that it be contacted by wireless. Gibson testified that Stone had expressed unease to him about the situation. "A ship is not going to fire rockets at sea for nothing," Stone said. "She looks very queer out of the water. Her lights look queer." Gibson observed, she looks rather to have a big side out of the water, and agreed that everything was not right with her, and that it was a case of some kind of distress. Stone, however, under questioning by the British inquiry, which became more and more incredulous, testified repeatedly that he did not think at the time that the rockets could have been distress signals, and that the possibility did not occur to him until after he learned the Titanic had sunk. By 2 o'clock, the ship appeared to be leaving the area. A few minutes later, Gibson informed Captain Lord as such, and that 8 white rockets had been seen. Lord asked whether he was sure of the color. Gibson said yes and left. At 2:20, Titanic sunk. At 3:40, Stone and Gibson, still sharing the middle watch, spotted rockets to the south. They did not see the ship that was firing them, but at about this time, RMS Carpathia was coming quickly from the southeast, firing rockets to let Titanic know that help was on the way. At 4:16, Chief Officer George F. Stewart relieved Stone, and almost immediately noticed, coming into view from the south, a brilliantly lit, 4-masted steamship with 1 funnel. Carpathia arrived on the scene shortly after 4 o'clock. Captain Lord woke up at 4:30 and went out on deck to decide how to proceed past the ice to the west. He sent Stewart to wake Evans and find out what happened to the ship they had seen to the south. They subsequently learned from the Frankfurt that the Titanic had sunk overnight. Lord ordered the ship underway. Californian's course took her west, slowly passing through the ice field, after which she turned south. Californian was sighted at 6 o'clock by SS Mount Temple, steaming for the north. Californian actually passed the Carpathian to the east, then turned and headed northeast back towards the rescue ship, arriving at 8:30. Carpathian was just finishing picking up the last of Titanic's survivors. After communicating with Californian, Carpathian left the area, leaving Californian to search for any other survivors. However, Californian only found scattered wreckage, empty lifeboats, and corpses, and continued on its route to America. Aftermath. As public knowledge grew of the Titanic disaster, questions soon arose about how the disaster occurred, as well as if and how it could have been prevented. A U.S. Senate inquiry into the sinking of the RMS Titanic started on April 19th, the day Californian arrived unnoticed in Boston. Initially, the world was unaware of her and her part in the disaster. On April 22nd, the inquiry discovered that a ship near Titanic had failed to respond to the distress signals. The identity of the ship was unknown. The next day, a small newspaper in New England, the Clinton Daily Item, printed a shocking story claiming that Californian had refused aid to the Titanic. The source for this shocking story was Californian's carpenter, James McGregor, who stated that he had been close enough to see Titanic's lights and distress rockets. On the same day, the Boston American printed a story sourced by the Californian's assistant engineer, Ernest Gill, who essentially told the same story as the Daily Item. Captain Lord also spoke with several Boston area newspapers but gave conflicting accounts. In a Boston Traveler article dated April 19th, Lord claimed that his ship was 30 miles from the Titanic, but in a Boston Post article dated April 24th, he claimed 20 miles. Lord told the Boston Globe that his ship had spent 3 hours steaming around the wreck site trying to render assistance, but Third Officer Grove later stated that the search ended after 2 hours at 10:40. When reporters asked Lord about his exact position on the night of the disaster, he refused to respond, calling such information state secrets. After the newspaper revelations on April 23rd, the U.S. Senate inquiry issued subpoenas for multiple members of the crew, including Gill and Lord. During his testimony, Gill repeated his claims. Lord's testimony was conflicting and changing. For example, he detailed 3 totally different ice conditions. He admitted knowing about the rockets after telling Boston newspapers his ship had not seen any rockets, but insisted they were not distress rockets, and that they were not fired from Titanic but a small steamship, the so-called third ship of the night. Yet the testimony of Captain J. Knapp at the U.S. Navy Hydrographer's Office made clear that Titanic and Californian were in sight of each other, and that no third vessel had been in the area. On May 2nd, the British Court of Formal Investigation began. Again, Lord gave conflicting, changing, and evasive testimony. By contrast, Captain Arthur Rostron of Carpathia at each inquiry gave consistent and forthright testimony. During the British inquiry, Rostron was asked to confirm an affidavit he had made to the U.S. Senate inquiry. Among other things in his affidavit, he confirmed that, quote, "It was daylight at about 4:20 a.m. Smoke weed every day. At 5 o'clock, it was light enough to see all around the horizon. We then saw 2 steamships to the northward, perhaps 7 or 8 miles distant. Neither of them was Californian," end quote. During the inquiry, the crew of Californian, like Captain Lord, gave conflicting testimonies. Most notably, Lord said he was not told that the nearby ship had disappeared. Conflicting testimony from James Gibson, who said he reported it and that Lord had acknowledged him. Also during the inquiries, Titanic survivors recalled seeing the lights of another ship after Titanic had hit the iceberg. To Titanic's fourth officer Boxall, the other ship appeared to be off Titanic's bow, 5 miles away and heading in her direction. Just like Californian's officers, Boxall attempted signaling the ship with a Morse lamp, but received no response. Both the American and British inquiries found that Californian must have been closer than the 19.5 miles claimed by Captain Lord, that each ship was visible from each other. Indeed, when Carpathia arrived at the wreck site, a vessel was clearly seen to the north. This was later identified as Californian. Both inquiries concluded that Captain Lord had failed to provide proper assistance to Titanic, the British inquiry concluding further that Californians responding to Titanic's rockets and going to assist may have saved many, if not all, of the lives that were lost. Despite the criticisms of Lord's conflict, no formal charges were ever brought against him. As such, he had no right to appeal against the inquiry's findings. Still, Lord was fired in August, but a Leyland director who believed he had been unfairly treated helped him get a job at a different steamship company. The issue was not considered again until the publication of Walter Lord's No Resistance to Captain Lord book A Night to Remember in 1955, and the release of the 1958 film of the same name. Captain Lord never saw the movie, but was offended by his portrayal anyway and sought a rehearing of the inquiry relating to the ship to clear his name. Petitions presented to the UK government in 1965 and 1968 by his union, the Mercantile Marine Service Association, failed to get the matter re-examined. However, when the wreck of the Titanic was discovered by Ballard's expedition in 1985, it was found to be 13 miles from its reported position, so the Board of Trade ordered a re-examination. By this point, Captain Lord had already died, but they kept going anyway. The British government's Marine Accident Investigation Branch concluded its reappraisal of evidence in 1992. Captain Barnett concluded, quote, "The Titanic was seen by the Californian and indeed kept under observation from 2300 hours or so after on 14 April until she sank, based on the evidence from Captain Lord and the two watch officers, Mr. Grove and Mr. Stone," end quote. The 1992 Mabe report concluded that Captain Lord and his crew's actions, quote, "fell far short of what was needed," end quote. Where are they now? Californian continued in normal commercial service until World War I, when the British government took control of her. She was responsible for transporting equipment and troops to the Allies mired in the Battle of Gallipoli. On November 9, 1915, while en route from Salonika to Marseille, Californian was torpedoed by German U-boat Steiner Majestat Unterseeboot 34. While she was under tow by a French patrol boat, she was torpedoed again, and around 7:45 a.m. she sank approximately 60 miles southwest of Cape Matapan, Greece. Californian went down less than 200 miles from where HMHS Britannic, Titanic's sister ship, would be sunk by a mine just over a year later. On the morning of July 17, 1918, the Carpathia was also sunk on a transatlantic voyage from Liverpool to Boston by Steiner Majestat Unterseeboot 55. The Carpathia was operated by the Cunard Line, which also operated the RMS Lusitania, which was infamously sunk by a German U-boat. The moral of this story is that the only people who are bigger scumbags than the Californians are the Germans. Now get out!
Tell me, do you know? Do you really know? Do you know it, yes or no? Is it yes or is it no? Do you know who I really am? I'm the boss, and I command, I direct the band. Better stop it if you're breathing. Princess, here it's time for freezing, cause instead of being a hero, you know, you might become a zero.